Today, we're going to be speaking with Anthony Barnett, who's a founder of the London-based global website Open Democracy and has also just published Taking Control, Humanity and America After Trump and the Pandemic. Anthony, really great to have you on.
Very good to be with you, David.
So, I mean, tell us, what's the main premise? What's the big change that you're looking at now in this post-Trump, at least for now, and maybe getting to post-pandemic, although not really, and it's sort of a question mark, but at least out of the initial stages of it, what has materially changed in your mind?
Yeah. Well, you're right to say post-Trump right for now, because I found two things really surprising about what happened when I was watching the January 6th event and afterwards. Because when it happened, I thought Trump is finished. And the first shock was the way in which the Republican Party rallied to his support. And I think what this means is that if he comes back, or if a Trump-like supporter like DeSantis comes back, it will be the closest thing to fascism that I have ever expected in my lifetime. What I call modern fascism. It won't be Nazism, it won't be expansionist, but their calling card is now to break the rules, to break the sense of consent, and in effect to implement a form of white supremacy. And this is really dangerous, not just for America, but for all of us around the world. So that was my first shock. And the second one was a different kind of surprise, which was when Biden became president and he thanked explicitly Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders movement. And he reached out to progressives in a constructive fashion. And that proved very popular. And in terms of my lifetime, I've lived under, since, the beginning, I remember Reagan and Thatcher, and since the beginning of what you might call a sort of monetism, that sense that the government is the problem and the market knows the solution. Progressives, like myself, have been pushed to the margins. It's been a sense of saying you've got to accept the market. There was a propagation of what I call fatalism in the book. And oddly enough, Trump broke fatalism. He made voting count. He empowered his followers. And at the beginning of the Biden presidency, there was a sense of an intelligent empowerment taking place as a counterweight. And I thought that is historic. What you're doing in America, the potential. I know everybody in America at the moment, all progressives at the moment, are feeling very down. There's the Supreme Court decisions that make it even worse. There's a sense of pessimism in the air. But the thing is, Biden won with a 7 million plurality. Trump got the largest vote any sitting president ever got in history, got 4.5 million more votes than Obama did, and Obama got 69.5 million, the largest ever. Trump got 74 million, and then Biden got 81 million. So we, if I can put it like that, we progressives are the majority. We've got to get our act together. The system is rigged against us. And so I felt we had to address this. And the question I asked myself is what, given the defeat of the left, given the defeat of progressives, given the defeat in effect of the socialist argument, of the trade union movement, why are progressives so strong? How come there was a 7 million majority? What is the strength? I can understand the weaknesses. And then I looked at this question of what I call the humanization. It's feminism, Black Lives Matter, human rights. Underneath marketization, all these forces against the market were growing. And I think that, from the point of view, whether it's Putin or whether it's Trump, or Xi in China or Modi in India, that's their threat. They understand the threat of real democracy. In a way that I think that the leadership of the progressive movement, certainly the Biden leadership, doesn't fully understand, also is rather frightened of. And we've got to get our act together. And that's what I've been trying to explore. And that's why I'm very pleased to be on your program. I want to talk, I think there's a bigger conversation, a worldwide conversation is needed to sort out how we go from here.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the olive branches extended by Joe Biden to progressives. You know what? I think my audience, which is mostly progressive, did
Right.
not feel as though there were really too many olive branches. I mean, I'll give you my perspective at the time, which was
Yes,
I voted
please.
for Joe Biden. I believed that on paper, Joe Biden ran on the most progressive platform of any Democratic nominee. I mean, if you look at Obama in 2012 and Hillary in 2016, on paper, for what Joe Biden was promising, it was to the left of that to some degree. But also there was this feeling that his heart really wasn't in a lot of the things he was sort of agreeing to. Like, for example, Joe Biden talked about maybe some student loan forgiveness. I didn't believe for a second that that was really something Biden was interested in, and he's really not done anything on it. Cannabis decriminalization or legalization, he sort of paid a little bit of lip service to it. I didn't think he really cared about that, and he's not really taken any action on it other than I think about 100 people whose records have been expunged for cannabis related crimes or something like that. So I went in there with eyes wide open, knowing that this was the better option. I voted for him. I think he's done some good things. But at the same time, I don't know that the majority of my progressive audience feels as though the olive branches were serious or that they've been followed through on.
Yeah, well, I think this is right, but I think that so there's different things here. There's Biden himself. I think
Yes.
that Biden himself was actually shocked by Trump's willingness to reach out to fascists, and I
Hmm.
don't think Biden is a racist. I think that's really important,
True.
and I think that he genuinely was pleased to put a black woman in the Supreme Court. I think that he does believe in integration. He's a multiracial figure. And that's a very deep and a very important issue. And I think that he reached out with his heart wasn't in it, but the point was, and what he stated and he understood is that without the support of the transformative promise of the Bernie Sanders movement, he wouldn't have won.
So is
So
that, I
that
guess,
puts
progress? Even if it was cynical, it's
from
still
our point of
progress.
view, we've got to say, okay, right, we've got something going for us here, right? Of course, we're not looking. Biden is a creature of the American political establishment
Yeah.
of the last 40 years. He predates neoliberalism. He predates the marketization, but there's got to be a big generational change taking place. So okay, we've got some strength here, and how do we build on this strength? And I think one of our problems has been, and one of the problems in America, but there's also a problem here in the UK, is too much looking at the president, at the center. You know, the right built its strength in the States. It built its strength locally. So it's building locally as well. We've got to be able to there's a very big progressive caucus in the Congress, and I made a short film called U.S. Progressives on a Knife Edge. I went to Washington to investigate the argument of my book, to test it, if you like. I talked to Representative Jamie Raskin. I talked to Pramila Jayapal, who's the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and I talked to Representative Ro Kahana, who represents Silicon Valley from California. And they were very interesting and articulate and reaching out, it seemed to me. These are not kind of, they're seeking to gain popular support, but there isn't a progressive gathering of governors of the US states. There's a weakness. Our weakness isn't just, oh, well, look, Biden isn't delivering for us. We've got to think, okay, this is really serious. We're up against fascism. We're not just got to stop this guy and those forces. We've got to build the alternative in a way that's credible and build on that majority.
In terms of building and alliances, you talk about the need for the progressive left to ally with centrists to achieve substantive progress in some senses. And I think the question of alliances is an interesting one. It's also very different depending on whether a country has a parliamentary system with proportional representation or a system like the United States or whatever the case may be. When it
Right.
comes to, or I guess even thinking about it more broadly, if the centrists don't really want the things the progressives want, who's compromising in those alliances?
Yeah, well, this is a very good question. Uh, uh, One thing which I think is shifting is that they are beginning to understand that without being in alliance with progressives, the center is going to lose.
Mm.
That's a very big shift. Up until now, whether it was under Blair or Clinton or Bill Clinton or even Obama, they felt they didn't need the left. All they needed was corporate power and corporate support and corporate competence.
Hmm.
And that would be enough. And they could rely upon the quiescence of the population. Trump has made voting count. He's empowered his supporters. And unless the forces, the democratic forces that are opposed to Trump, unless we empower our supporters, we're finished. And that empowerment, if you take the Supreme Court decision, right, on Roe. Now, what does a woman's right to choose mean? In my view, a woman's right to choose is their right to life. I think life is about choice. I think one of the extraordinary things about that larger feminist movement is that it empowers all of us, I think men included, in greater control over our lives. And one of the great historic problems of the center and the liberals that you talk to is they just say, we'll give you a bit of welfare, we'll give you some, maybe we'll give you student loan, maybe we won't, but whatever it is, you've got to be passive. They rely upon our passivity. And I think that Trump has shown that that game is over. So we need to build on that. And I think that we've got to be thinking afresh. But my argument is not that I'm an optimist. It's that we haven't lost yet. And we need to think about what the forces, the positive forces that there are. And I think that this sense of saying, okay, we're going to show you what democratic empowerment is really about.
We in the few minutes we have left, I want to talk a little bit about the next 2 to 4 years. You know, many in the media always like to say this is the most interesting, important, and significant election of our time because it benefits the media because that sounds interesting. But I've used this example before. In 2012, in the United States, when Mitt Romney was challenging Barack Obama's reelection, I voted for Barack Obama and I thought he was the better choice, but it didn't feel like it was the most consequential election of our time. It was sort of like, yes, taxes on the rich will go down a little bit if Mitt Romney wins and he's socially conservative and I'm not, but
Right.
it didn't feel as though there was as much riding on it. We now have a situation where Boris Johnson resigning in the UK, the rise of the right-wing nationalist parties in Europe. We have now in 2022 here in the United States, the first Trump era election where Trump is not president nor on the ballot. And there's this real question as to whether his constituents will remain engaged in politics or not, and how that will relate to 2024. I'm increasingly getting the sense that the next election cycle or two in Europe and the United States is actually of major consequence in setting the direction for the next decade or more. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. This is the point I was trying to make earlier. I think that Trump now represents a break from traditional republicanism. And the January the 6th demonstrated that. The fact that they're saying the election was stolen, what does this mean? There's not really a denial that there was a 7 million plurality for Biden. What they're really saying is the people who are voting, we don't count as Americans. What they're saying, it's an argument for white supremacy. It's not put in explicitly racist terms, but that's what it's about. It's about imposing minority rule. And imposing minority rule is a kind of fascism. It's an autocracy. And that's what's at stake. Now, what is the opposite of that? And this is what's exciting, if you like, and grim and interesting, and as you say, historic, is that we can't go back to Clintonism. We can't go back to Obama. Those days are over, partly because of the financial crisis. No, everybody knows that government is not the problem. We can't trust the market. So we've got to, a choice is beginning to face, historic choice is being forced on the United States, either Trumpism or a explicitly multiracial democratic future. And that means mobilizing, and that means that without progressives, the liberal center will lose.
Do you think that at this point, what happens in the US is as influential on what happens in Europe and vice versa as at prior times? Has the linkage been softened or made more explicit?
Well, that's also a very interesting question. So, American hegemony over Europe has lessened. American hegemony in the world. America is still the strongest and most powerful country in the world militarily and economically. The dollar is still supreme, but it no longer rules the world in the way it did. That's primarily thanks to China. And that's a good thing, in my
Hmm.
view. So, in one sense, Europe is now more important than it was. But if America goes fascist, if America embraces Trump or DeSantis and goes for minority rule and allies, in effect, with Putin, with Xi in China, against the European Union, then the effects will be devastating.
Hmm.
So this historic turning point of this coming cycle between now and 2024 is absolutely crucial for all of us around the world. The United States is still the hinge country, and the choice you're facing is still a choice that will affect the entire world and the future of the planet.
Uh, those are sizable stakes. That's for sure. We've been speaking with Anthony Barnett, who has just published "Taking Control: Humanity and America After Trump and the Pandemic." Anthony, really a pleasure speaking with you today.
Really a pleasure. Thank you very much, David. Take care.